She spent her whole life believing she was sick. But the truth was far more shocking. Her mother controlled everything, lied about every illness, and trapped her in a life of deception. What happened next is unbelievable. Stay with us to hear the full jaw-dropping story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. From the moment Gypsy Rose Blanchard was born in 1991, her life was wrapped in a carefully crafted illusion to the world. She was a fragile child suffering from an endless list of devastating illnesses. Her mother, Claudine Dee Dee Blanchard, told everyone that Gypsy had leukemia, muscular dystrophy, asthma, epilepsy, severe allergies, developmental delays, and virtually every chronic illness imaginable. They lived inside hospitals, surrounded by doctors, medical equipment, and charity groups who believed they were witnessing a mother fighting desperately to keep her daughter alive. But the reality was far darker. Gypsy was not sick. Dee Dee, suffering from Munchausen Syndrome by Proxy, intentionally fabricated and induced illnesses in her daughter so she could receive sympathy, attention, and financial benefits. She shaved Gypsy's head to make her look like a cancer patient, forced her into a wheelchair even though she could walk, and gave her medications she didn't need, medications that often caused real side effects. Gypsy grew up believing her mother completely. What else could she do? She had never been allowed to go to school. She had no friends, no independent thoughts, and no idea how much of her life was a lie. Dee Dee controlled everything: her medical decisions, her daily routine, her food, her clothes, even her thoughts. Together, they received free flights to Disney World, charity gifts, housing from Habitat for Humanity, and the support of countless well-wishers who admired Dee Dee's strength. But behind closed doors, Gypsy was living in a prison. Dee Dee emotionally manipulated her, threatened her, and terrified her into silence. If Gypsy ever questioned something, like why she didn't feel sick, Dee would punish her, sometimes refusing food, sometimes threatening to break her fingers, sometimes simply saying, "Without me, you'll die. You can't survive on your own." As Gypsy grew older, she started noticing small cracks in her mother's stories. Her legs didn't feel dead. Her body didn't feel as weak as Dee Dee claimed. And when she tried secretly standing at night, she didn't fall. But Dee Dee always reminded her, "You're too young to understand. Mommy knows best." And the world agreed. Gypsy was the poor, sick girl. Dee Dee was the angel mother. No one suspected the truth. No doctor challenged Dee Dee's claims strongly enough. No neighbor realized what was happening behind the closed doors of their pink house. Gypsy felt something was wrong, but she didn't yet have the strength or the knowledge to escape. Her freedom was still years away, and it would come at a terrible price. This was only the beginning of one of the most shocking cases of abuse and murder in American true crime history. As Gypsy entered her teenage years, the perfect illusion Dee Dee had built began to crack, slowly, quietly but unmistakably. Gypsy had spent her entire childhood believing she was terminally ill, believing she would never walk, never grow normally, never live a life without doctors. But now, small moments of doubt started to creep into her mind. One of the first things she noticed was her physical growth. Dee Dee insisted Gypsy was still a young child, around 14, even though Gypsy could feel her body maturing. Her teeth were falling out not because of disease, but because of the unnecessary medications Dee Dee forced on her. Gypsy began to feel that her mother was lying about her real age, but she had no way to confirm it. All official documents were hidden or forged by Dee Dee, including her birth certificate. The second crack appeared when Gypsy secretly stood up at night. She waited until Dee Dee was asleep, then carefully held onto furniture and pulled herself up. She expected pain or collapse, but nothing happened. Her legs were strong. Her muscles responded normally. The wheelchair was never medically necessary. That moment terrified her. If she could walk, what else had her mother lied about? But Dee Dee controlled every inch of Gypsy's life. She never allowed doctors to speak directly to Gypsy. Whenever a doctor asked Gypsy a question, Dee Dee answered for her. "She can't talk much. She's mentally slow. She doesn't understand." These were lies, but doctors believed her. Dee Dee always sounded confident, always carried stacks of falsified medical papers, and always told emotional stories about her daughter's suffering. Most physicians were too busy or too trusting to challenge her narrative. Isolation was another weapon. Gypsy had no schooling, no friends, no social life. Dee kept her indoors and told neighbors that Gypsy had the mind of a 7-year-old. Anyone who tried to talk to Gypsy was carefully supervised. Dee acted like a guardian angel, but in reality she was guarding her victim. Still, Gypsy's curiosity grew. Around 2012, she secretly used a laptop that Dee Dee kept hidden. At night when her mother was asleep, Gypsy would sneak it out and use the internet. She discovered things her mother told her were impossible, like the fact that people her age could date, talk freely online, and even make friends. Gypsy created a secret Facebook account where she met Nicholas Godejohn, a man with his own emotional and mental struggles. Their conversations became Gypsy's first real connection to the outside world. She felt seen, heard, and valued for the first time in her life. Nick wasn't horrified by her condition. He fell in love with her, even the parts she was forced to hide. With Nick, Gypsy finally voiced her darkest fears. "I don't think I'm really sick. My mom won't let me live. She controls everything. I feel like a prisoner." These late-night conversations planted the seed of rebellion. Gypsy began imagining a life outside the pink-painted prison Dee Dee had built. She wanted to run away. She wanted to live freely. She wanted to be treated like an adult, not a fragile doll. But Gypsy also knew something else. Dee Dee would never let her go. Not willingly. Not ever. And so the path toward tragedy began to take shape. A path Gypsy felt was the only way to escape a lifetime of lies and abuse. By the time Gypsy was in her early 20s, the pressure of living a life built on lies had reached its breaking point. Her growing relationship with Nicholas Godejohn became the only escape from the suffocating world Dee Dee had created. Nick wasn't just a boyfriend, he was the first person Gypsy ever trusted enough to reveal her true reality. Every message she sent him carried a mixture of fear, hope, and desperation. She told him things she had never dared to say out loud. "I can walk. I'm not sick. My mom won't let me live my life." And Nick believed her. For Gypsy, love and escape became inseparable. Nick was flawed, deeply flawed. He struggled with mental health issues, violent tendencies, and a distorted sense of morality. But he gave Gypsy something no one else had: the promise of freedom. This promise grew into a plan. At first, Gypsy simply dreamed of running away with him, starting a life together far from her mother's control. But every time she tried to take even a small step toward independence, Dee Dee tightened her grip. She hid Gypsy's laptop, monitored her conversations, and even chained her to the bed once when she suspected Gypsy wanted to leave. Gypsy realized then that escape without confrontation was impossible. She believed Dee Dee would rather kill her than let her go. And so, in her desperation, Gypsy made a decision she would carry for the rest of her life. Dee Dee had to be stopped, once and for all. Nick agreed to help. In June 2015, they put their plan into motion. Nick traveled by bus from Wisconsin to Missouri, guided only by text messages from Gypsy. She hid him in the bathroom of the small pink house while Dee Dee slept. That night, the house was silent, too silent. Gypsy's heart pounded as she handed Nick the knife she had stolen days earlier. She couldn't bear to witness what would happen next. Gypsy locked herself in the bathroom, covered her ears, and waited. Moments later, the quiet house erupted with screams. Nick stabbed Dee Dee repeatedly as she slept. Gypsy stayed hidden, trembling, crying, praying it would end quickly. Despite everything her mother had done to her, Gypsy could not bring herself to watch. She could not face the brutality, even though she believed this was the only path to survival. When the house finally fell silent, Gypsy emerged. Dee Dee was dead. The woman who had controlled her for her entire life, who had lied to her, manipulated her, isolated her, drugged her, was gone. Gypsy felt shock, guilt, and relief twisted together in a way she couldn't understand. Gypsy and Nick quickly gathered money, clothing, and a few belongings. They fled the house, leaving behind the pink wheelchair, the medical equipment, and the mountain of lies that had defined Gypsy's life. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't even know how long she had before police discovered the crime. All she knew was that she was free, terrifyingly, suddenly, overwhelmingly free. Gypsy and Nick boarded a bus and traveled to Wisconsin, believing they could begin a new life together. But neither of them realized that the real storm was just beginning, because soon the whole world would learn the truth. When Gypsy and Nick fled Missouri, they imagined they had slipped into a new life, one without hospitals, wheelchairs, or Dee Dee's constant control. But freedom came with fear. Gypsy knew that her mother's body would eventually be discovered, and when it was, the police would come looking for her. Still, she did something that would change everything. She posted a cryptic message on the shared Facebook account she used with Dee Dee. "That bitch is dead." It was impulsive, emotional, and catastrophic. Neighbors instantly panicked. Friends called police. Something was wrong inside the quiet pink house. Officers were sent to perform a welfare check. They found the body, Dee Dee Blanchard had been brutally stabbed in her bedroom. But what shocked investigators even more was something they did not find. Gypsy. They feared the worst. The entire community, who believed Gypsy was a frail, terminally ill girl, thought she had been kidnapped or murdered. News stations broadcast alerts, asking anyone with information to come forward. But it didn't take long for investigators to track her. The Facebook post led them to Nick Godejohn's home in Wisconsin. There, police found both Nick and Gypsy, alive, unharmed, and walking. Yes, walking. For the first time in her life, the world saw Gypsy standing on her own 2 feet. The image was so shocking that detectives initially believed they had found the wrong girl, but it was her. The same girl Dee Dee had pushed around in a wheelchair for years. The truth began to unfold. Gypsy told detectives everything: years of fabricated illnesses, forced medications, unnecessary surgeries, and the complete psychological control Dee Dee held over her. Doctors stepped forward with records showing they had questioned Dee Dee's claims years earlier, but had been manipulated into silence. By her emotional stories, medical files revealed a staggering history of deception: unneeded feeding tubes, catheters, breathing machines, drugs that caused real physical damage, surgeries performed based only on Dee Dee's word, a false diagnosis of muscular dystrophy made before Gypsy could even walk. The world was horrified. Dee Dee had been praised as an angelic caretaker. Instead, she had been systematically abusing her daughter for decades under the guise of love and sacrifice. Public opinion divided into 2 camps. Some said Gypsy was a murderer who helped plan her mother's death. Others said Gypsy was a victim who saw no other way out of a lifetime of torture. When the case reached the news, it exploded. Online forums analyzed every detail. Documentaries, interviews, and talk shows debated the moral questions. How had no doctor stopped Dee Dee? How had no neighbor suspected the truth? How had this gone on for so long without anyone intervening? For Gypsy, the public attention was overwhelming. She had spent her entire life hidden behind fabricated illnesses, and now she was exposed to the entire world. But for the first time, people weren't seeing her as a sick child. They were seeing her as a survivor. Still, accountability had to be faced. A murder had been committed. Someone had to answer for it. And the final step of Gypsy's long journey from abuse to freedom would be decided in a courtroom. The courtroom became the place where the world would finally try to make sense of everything that had happened in the Blanchard home. Gypsy Rose Blanchard, once believed to be a dying girl trapped in a wheelchair, now stood before the judge as a young woman, fully capable of walking and speaking for herself. The contrast was shocking, even heartbreaking, but the central question remained: was Gypsy a cold-blooded killer or a victim pushed beyond her breaking point? Prosecutors initially considered charging her with first-degree murder, a charge that could have brought life in prison. But as investigators dug deeper into her medical history, psychological manipulation, and the years of Munchausen by proxy abuse she endured, public opinion and expert testimony shifted dramatically. Gypsy was not a typical defendant. She had been denied education, independence, healthcare decisions, and even her own identity. Each detail revealed the extent of Dee Dee's control. Gypsy lived through unnecessary surgeries, forced medications, and emotional imprisonment. Her entire world was shaped by lies she never chose. It became clear that Gypsy did not kill out of malice. She acted out of desperation. She saw no escape, no help, no future. She believed that the only way to survive was to eliminate the person who had stolen her life from the moment she was born. In July 2016, Gypsy accepted a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Many believed the sentence was fair. Others felt she should have been freed immediately. Nicholas Godejohn, who carried out the killing, received a much harsher punishment: life in prison without parole. Their futures were different, but both were shaped by the cost of desperation. Inside prison, Gypsy did something extraordinary. She began to live for the first time. She gained weight, grew out her hair, pursued education, and connected with people who treated her like an adult, not a patient. Interviews with Gypsy throughout her incarceration revealed a startling truth. She was healthier in prison than she had ever been at home. She learned freedom inside a place meant to confine her. One of her most memorable statements came during a later interview. "I feel freer in prison than I ever did living with my mom." It was a haunting reminder of the psychological chains Dee Dee had placed on her. As years passed, Gypsy became the center of documentaries, Interviews, news specials, and public conversations about parental abuse and Munchausen by Proxy. Her case raised critical questions. How can such long-term abuse go unnoticed by doctors, neighbors, social workers? How many other victims are suffering silently in similar situations? What responsibility does society hold when it fails to protect a child? In December 2023, after serving 8 years, Gypsy was granted early parole. She walked out of prison a free woman, something she had once believed she would never experience. Today, Gypsy is rebuilding her life. She advocates for abuse survivors and speaks openly about the psychological scars left behind. Though she lives with the weight of her mother's death, she also carries a new understanding of her own strength. The story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard is not just a tale of tragedy and murder. It is a story of survival of a girl who was trapped in a world of lies and found freedom in the most painful way imaginable. It forces us to question how far someone can be pushed before they break, and how powerful the human desire for freedom truly is.